panel is Talent Wars, the quest for the best founders. So why don't we start with some quick introductions, and we'll get right into it.
Hi, hello. I'm Cyan Banister. I'm a partner at Founders Fund. I joined about 3 months ago. Prior to that, I was an angel investor with about 100 plus companies in my portfolio. Most notable is probably Uber and Postmates.
Manish, I'm a partner at Highland Capital, a global venture capital firm. I lead the consumer internet practice here in the Valley. I'm also a professor at Stanford, teach a couple classes. Before that, I was an early employee at Google.
Great. Kate Mitchell, co-founder and partner at Scale Venture Partners. I've been in venture for over 2 decades, so seen successful and unsuccessful teams. I'm on the board of Silicon Valley Bank. I've been on the board of the NVCA and former chair, and do a lot of public commentary on places like CNBC, so on tech.
And I'm Thomas Lee, business columnist with the San Francisco Chronicle. So this panel is about trying to find the best talent amongst founders. So let's start with a basic question about how do you identify the best founders? And what I mean by that is I'm sure everyone can agree that we use catchphrases like, oh, you have to be passionate, I heard bored, you got to be smart. I mean, that's sort of the same things that you say. What are you looking for in a person? Well, they have to be smart and funny. Everyone says that. Okay, so I'm wondering, is there a framework that you can personally work off of that doesn't just involve your gut feeling or some sort of instinct that you have? Like all of you kind of take a stab at that.
Well, for me, it actually is gut feeling. I wish I could say something smarter than that, but that's the truth. And part of the gut comes from 20 years of experience of working with operators, working with entrepreneurs, and you start to learn what are some signs of what could make a good entrepreneur and where you might be able to find them. But for me, it's absolutely gut. I can't say I have like some sort of checklist, because I don't.
For me, the number one thing is judgment. As much as you want to help a founder along the way, all great companies are built by the founders, not by the board, not by the VCs. You help them along the way. And so great founders have great judgment. And I think that breaks down to a lot of different things from, judgments about when to fold, when to be resilient, when to be authentic, how to hire, how to build a great culture, all those things. So I think judgment is like the number one thing you should look for in a good founder.
Yeah, I'd say one of the things I have learned is not to fall in love with founding team. And we're market investors first. And so I have such a gut reaction to a great founding team, and then I realize, I don't love the market they're in, but I love these people. So I have to really, stop and step back. I do find 2 things are valuable in founding teams, particularly founders. It is this weird dichotomy, and Manish, it sort of follows on what you're saying. We'll use that word, passionate, but they're not good if they're also not dispassionate. Somebody who doesn't see the signs around them is not going to iterate to success. They need to be open to feedback all the time, but be confident. So you have to be confident and kind of doubt yourself at the same time. So I think it's holding both ideas in your head at the same time. And the common denominator, I think, in addition to judgment, is communication. Doesn't have to be jokes. I love them. But there are different styles that work. That's the other thing. Pattern recognition. They come in all shapes and sizes and all ages and everything else. But I think feeling that if we're going through good and bad times, and our best deals are companies where the founders stay the whole way. So the issue is, can we talk about things? So I like to spend time, even during that interview due diligence process, if it's tough for each of us to ask each other difficult questions and we don't understand, we're not invested in each other's success, it's probably not going to work out. So I test my gut, based on that, because we're gonna go through things together. If we can talk about it, it'll be good.
When you say judgment, is that just another way of saying also maturity? Do you need to have a certain amount of maturity to make the right judgment? I think one of the panels talked about it takes probably a big entrepreneur to say, I think I'm going to need to raise a down round. That's kind of hard to swallow, but if that's the best thing for your startup, then that's the best thing. So is that what we're talking about when you mention judgment?
Yeah, I think it's actually, the way I like to think about it is sophistication, because I think maturity can be a misnomer. So many amazing companies in the world, Google, Facebook, others, were started by people that many would have said were immature, but they were very sophisticated in how they looked at the world. And so that sophistication, I think you look at not just in terms of how they're building their company, but how they've built their life, right? Like you look at sort of, what decisions did they make from 0 to 18? Where did they choose to go to school? Did they choose to go to school? Why did they drop out? All of those contexts, all that context really matters, and it's really breaking that out. Because at the end of the day, all of that influences how they view the world and how they're eventually going to build that company.
And don't you find me, part of it is spending time with them and hearing them think it through. There's no one path that's right. It's the rationale that brought them through that gives you your sense of what kind of founder they'll be. Yeah.
Well, is there, in terms of like we talked about the slowing of the market here in terms of, there's some valuation cuts and whatnot. Are you finding that you have more time in to really kind of weed out the founders that approach you? Whereas before, maybe there's a lot of money, there's a lot of companies being hurled at you, you feel a need to put your money to work. So, but now that things are slowing down a bit, can you afford to be a little bit more choosy in terms of who do you work with?
So I don't perceive things as slowing down personally. Maybe that's just because I've always had sort of the similar cadence of deal flow. But in general, sorry, can you re-ask the question real quick?
I'm saying that do you feel like you have enough time to really make a formed decision about whether to work with a particular founder or not?
Oh, do I have time? Of course. Yeah, definitely have time. Sorry. The noise from the back is really, really disturbing.
Yeah, can we keep that door closed? It is kind of tough to hear.
Yeah, it's really hard to hear up here. Sorry about that. So yeah, I have plenty of time to work and try to figure out which founders I want to work with, and I don't think that my deal flow has changed considerably. As a matter of fact, since joining a firm, it's actually more. I went from like 1 to 2 meetings a week to like 5, 6 a day. And so I can't say that things are slowing down because I'm not seeing that.
What about the rest of you?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think things are slowing down, particularly at the Series A stage. I think at the later stage, I think there is compression, but sort of what I do, Series A, I don't think it's slowing down. In terms of the time, that's the job. Like I don't care if it's like a bull market, bear market, whatever. That is the job.
Right.
And like I think Jason Koskana said it well. It's like take the hour, meet with somebody, take more than that. I mean, because on the entrepreneur side, you're committing an important part of your life to involving this person in your life in the same way. When I make an investment in a company, that's going to be a 7, 8, 10-year journey for me. And so if you can't make the time, you should not be doing the job.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, if we don't have the time, we just decline the deal. We don't have enough time to get through. And I think what I find is the balance. Because I agree, deal flow is as strong as it's ever been. But for us, it's, when things are at the peak, the venture capitalist is being interviewed and being due diligence. And that's the tenor of the conversation. And when things are at the trough, we're doing it. I actually think, back to my point about communication, we're going to be partners together. I think entrepreneurs should spend as much time due diligencing me as I am them, because we are going to be partners in different ways, and hope we still are both sitting in our seats as we go through the whole thing. So I think it is really making sure that balance is there, and right now I think it's shifting a little bit more towards the venture investor, and I think it's, it should be a balance.
And on that point, I think just so many entrepreneurs do themselves a disservice when they meet you on a Friday and say, hey, are you in or out on Monday? We're closing that quickly, right? They're not really taking that time to interview the VC, right? They're running an auction, which is the worst way to build a business at the early stage, right? Because there are bad investors and there are good investors, and some of those folks will make a material difference in your company either way, right? So you want to really make sure you invest in understanding how that person thinks, and do you have cultural alignment.
This is dating, not Tinder.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we're basically glorified salespeople, and I hate to say that about venture capital investors, but that's what we are. We're selling money and we're selling our firm. And so each one of us has a different thing that we bring to the table and value that we add. And so, I really think just like a sales process, this is how you find good entrepreneurs, is it's all about network, and it's all about like putting that effort in.
I just thought of a new startup, Tinder for VCs and entrepreneurs. Swipe right, swipe left, right? So kind of jumping on that, it's very interesting. It is a lot like dating, and I'm wondering, I asked you what you were looking for, but what are some deal breakers that if someone does that you're just like, okay, that's pretty much out. You talked about if they were just like, selling to the highest bidder, but is there any 1 or 2 things that are deal breakers for all of you?
Ethics.
Ethics, wow,
Ethics
that's the
and
first
honesty.
time I heard someone use that word.
Oh, yeah, I mean, if we can't trust each other, and if there's something, this is a relationship. It better be there, and we better feel it's there.
Yeah, I think it's, running an auction sort of process, right? Ethics, these are just table stakes, right? And I think for me, the the counter to sort of what I'm looking for, what I'm looking for is culture fit, right? At the early stage, I mean, yeah, you'll have some traction, but it's really, really hard to tell if it's going to become a massive company. You know, you can always believe in a dream and believe in a team, but do you have that cultural alignment? Because who knows who's going to be right or wrong when hard decisions happen, but you want to make sure at least you have the cultural alignment. You think about the world in similar ways, and at least in ways where you'll be able to continue to build on that trust.
Same. Okay. You're on the task force, I believe, the National Venture Capital Association.
Diversity Task Force, right.
Diversity.
I co-chair it.
And one of the things that, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but there's some research into trying to find out when you're evaluating a founder, how much bias kind of comes to play in terms of there's a reason why we're overwhelmingly white and male, right? So I'm kind of curious, does that how do you limit your bias, or are you even aware that you have biases?
Well, that's my point of not always relying on your gut, because your gut tends to go, and science shows this to people that you already know and like. That's who you are. It validates yourself. So you have to be really careful about that. I think it goes to deal flow, which is going out and really reaching into communities that you don't normally network with to get deal flow, which increases your deal flow. We don't do it at scale because we think it's necessarily a good thing to do, although we do. We do it because we think this is the best thing for our limited partners, a smart thing to do, to get a broader set of investors. So I spend a lot of time myself with the underrepresented minorities, because we already get great flow out of the Valley, the people we know. We happen, because we're half female, to get a lot of females. We have a lot of foreign-born entrepreneurs, so we get lots of Asia, Israel, Europe, but we really reach into those communities, and it's improved our deal flow significantly. And I think you have to be careful about that, because and it's really sitting and listening, and it's what Jason talked about. Stop and listen. And I went to an event where I was the only person with blonde hair in it, and everybody there had very dark hair. And of course, the first thing I noticed in the room is how I'm a minority in that room, and how different I looked. Reverend Jackson did a Push 2020 event a while ago. Like 10 seconds into that first pitch, I was so awed by this entrepreneur, I stopped looking. And you really have to get yourself in that mode, get yourself out of that, that initial feeling that you have when you walk in the room that I'm different, they're different. Stop, listen to what they're saying, get in the moment. And I was really blown away, and you have to do more of that.
You guys want to take a step of that? Or?
Yeah,
By
sure.
the way, I will do a quick one. The Homebrew, Hunter Walk calls going into groups that don't get as much venture capital opportunity arbitrage. So that's what we're looking for. Sorry, Cyan.
Oh yeah, so I gave a talk before I got into Founders Fund, about how Scott and I worked at the Launch Festival. And one of the things that Scott really focused on was what I call farming and network opportunities. And that was really great, and there's really awesome opportunities that come our way just from alumni and from our local network. But again, it sort of reinforces a bias. So basically, if you think about that, it's only people he worked with, went to college with, worked for him, et cetera. And so how we solve for this is I started going out to events like these and started speaking and putting myself in situations where I was exposed to different networks and new people. And so I think that's how we do it, to your point, is we have to basically go places we've never gone before and meet exciting new entrepreneurs there.
And I would say actually the diversity question or problem that exists in entrepreneurship, at least startup entrepreneurship, and even on the venture side, I think goes beyond just sort of like gender and race. It's actually like socioeconomic background, right? If you actually go through, I think actually this is probably the most diverse panel today. It's like 2 women, an Asian guy, and a brown guy. So it's great.
Okay, let's tweet that.
But people really, a lot of people go, they went to Stanford and Harvard and all these schools, et cetera. But what did they do before that? How did they get there? How many went there on scholarship, et cetera? And all those things frame how someone thinks about the world. And I think it's even a bigger issue that doesn't get talked about enough, that socioeconomic diversity.
Should we also be thinking about, I think the old way of doing things was like founders or entrepreneurs would try to pitch you, and now you're saying that you're taking a more proactive role and trying to identify the founders. How early do you go? Do you try to even talk to people that could be founders one day, or is that something that's out of your wheelhouse?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's something definitely at Founders Fund we believe in, especially because a lot of the things that we're looking at are science-based, and so you want to find people at their earliest stages thinking about doing something bold and brave and different that's going to change the world. And so we are looking for those people. Sometimes it's before even the formation of their company.
Absolutely, totally agree with that. The earlier, the better, just to begin that conversation, that
Right.
dialogue. And I think most venture capitalists take a very long view on relationships and people. So whether it's this company, the next company, who knows? So even when this person's thinking about leaving a tech company, or thinking about leaving their PhD program, starting that relationship sooner is better.
Yeah, and we vest in first dollars of revenue. It could be the first 100,000 of revenue. Average trailing is about 2 million. So we usually track when these guys start investing, and it's back to that judgment, getting to know. By the time we invest, we've known each other for a while. It sort of stood the test of time for all the things we talked about earlier.
I'll make this last point before we wrap up. I read a fascinating survey about asking millennials, I think mostly high school students, what are the top places they want to work? Believe it or not, number one was 3M, which is not exactly, it's obviously non-Silicon Valley. Number two is Google. So I'm kind of wondering, is this the type of, when we're talking about competing for talent, are you thinking you're competing for talent for people who may eventually want to work for the good old boring 3M?
Well, 3M has an unusually high degree of R&D
yeah, they
spending.
do, and there's a lot
So
of innovation.
there's a reason somebody wanted
But
to
also
do it.
healthcare was also listed in the list. And in fact, there were only kind of 2 tech companies in the top 10. So I'm kind of curious, is that the type of, should you be worried about competing for that talent? Are these kids going to work for 3M, or are they going to start their own businesses that you're going to finance?
Well, entrepreneurs either start out deciding that they don't want to work for anyone,
That's true.
or they join a Google or 3M and realize through that process that there's something else out there for them. So some of the best entrepreneurs are actually product managers, executives, directors at companies. So they come from all over the place, and they're all different walks of life. So I think it's fine to want to work at 3M and Google. Hopefully you'll leave, because I call Google the geek retirement home, but hopefully they'll leave and go start
the
something.
velvet coffin. Yeah.
But yeah, so they come everywhere. So it
Geek
doesn't matter what
retirement
they-
home, Tinder, we're rocking it here. Yeah. I think at this point in the cycle, you tend to find people just being a bit more reticent, which is, Rebecca mentioned it two panels prior. This is the best time to start a company, so I think you're right. You have to sort of coax people. A paycheck when you're worried that your company may not start is tough, and I think it's probably easier here in Silicon Valley, where people kind of know you can be serially even unsuccessful and still be quite successful in the end. I think when you get to places like Detroit and Japan and other places, it's tougher. So I think when you get into the heartland, people want to take conservative choices. So hopefully you can encourage entrepreneurship. There's a large, I think a lot of folks know, Global Entrepreneurship Summit down at Stanford this week. The president, I think, is going to be there on Friday, and it's to encourage more risk-taking around the world.
Well, how about a hand for our panel? Thank you very much for joining us today.